Welcome everyone. I'm quite excited. It's a very interesting time that we live in, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. Before we begin, let me pull up a bit about myself. Let me quickly share my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right.
We just put it on slide mode.
All right. So I am Akbar. I am a chief architect for Fractal. I've been a technology leader at Fractal, primarily solving complex problems for the C-suite. I've served in about 8 countries. I was in the US for about 8 years, where I was solving complex machine learning problems, building AI products for Fortune 100 companies. Currently, I'm back in India. I'm solving a bunch of problems specifically around responsible AI and developing frameworks and architect guidebooks for Government of India in partnership with the Ministry of Electronics and IT. And separately, I'm also solving similar problems for large companies in India as well. So that's a brief about me. I'll quickly hop into the core of our agenda. So broadly, I have put together a bunch of things that are happening in the real world today, some of the challenges that we are tackling as we speak, because AI today is disrupting almost everything, right? Until December of last year, things seem normal, but there's been a huge shift because of a few innovations and beta releases, things like ChatGPT, and it's disrupting a lot of our businesses, including our own. So I want to talk to you about how that is affecting the industry and how we are thinking about it. So with that, I'll step into the first agenda of our agenda item, which is the need for responsible AI. So you must have heard a lot of stories about how AI is affecting all our lives, right? There are applications where certain boundaries of privacy are being tested. There are new ways in which AI is being used, which we're not sure if we can be comfortable with. Like, for example, there is AI that can emulate a dead person, manner of speaking, the way they think. Is that even ethical? Right? Those are some questions that are being posed by this new technology. Governments are also taking notice. China has put up laws that govern deep fakes. There are medical algorithms that are using AI to diagnose patients, and certain communities are being affected negatively. There are also instances where art is being generated by AI, and there are things around copyrights, legality, morality of some of these applications. So AI is pushing the moral, legal, and ethical boundaries of how we function today as a community. I'll probably deep down into each area in a more detailed manner using some stories. The first story is around generative AI, especially in image and video creation. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Midjourney, DALL-E. These are basically, you give them a text and they'll generate an image for you, right? Now, when you're doing this, should you reveal the underlying AI system, right? That's a question that everybody's asking. That's a question even policymakers and legal institutes are making. If it's generated by AI, does it need to be revealed? That's one question. The other question is, if it's inspired by existing artists. So, example, let's say if we create an image that is inspired by a lot of digital content that is authored by somebody else, should that artist be represented in that image? Should the art be attributed to the original authors? And should the consumer be informed about its use? Right? Those things are being questioned today. So there's a lot of copyright ambiguity. So one of the core tenets, especially in responsible AI or any machine learning application, is around transparency. So how do you make these systems transparent? How do you operate in a more transparent manner as a consumer of this AI system. All those things are not very clear, but are being challenged today. So that's the first story I want to pose or provocate. The second one is around the use of AI itself. Let's say today we have technology that is embedded in what we call clinical decision support systems. So think of an iPad that a doctor carries. That iPad can have an AI, and the doctor can give it inputs, and it can help diagnose you, right? Today we have applications where if you scan your X-rays or even your medical images, it can detect anomalies, medical issues very quickly. It doesn't need a AI, a medical expert to tell. It can need a medical expert to validate, but they are quite effective. They can pinpoint very minute differences very quickly, which a human may not be able to do. So in this situation, let's say a doctor uses that system and misdiagnoses you. Who is accountable for this misdiagnosis? Is it the doctor? Is it the person who developed the machine and the tablet itself, or is it the person who developed the AI application? That aspect is another area that is being challenged today. It is widely contested in separate countries in different manners. There are cultural aspects to this as well. Like for example, in China or even most South Asian countries, where the family is the core unit, whereas if you go to the Western world, the individual is the core unit. So questions around morality, legality of how decisions are being made for individuals, and especially when use cases of AI are concerned, are being questioned differently in different countries. So Japan may be okay if a doctor is responsible, but in the US or in Western communities, the entire chain of individuals, from the doctor to the developer of the product to the developer of the AI application, all need to be held accountable. Overall, all humans are key actors in the design and implementation of AI workflow. So who in the chain gets held responsible is still open for interpretation, and today different communities are interpreting it differently. So that's the second story. This is something that's being widely challenged and discussed in the community. Now, the third one, okay, this is another interesting space. Generative AI can create video, can create image, can create sound. How many of you have seen Obama's deepfake? Maybe a quick show of hands will help. Okay, if you're not familiar, there's a very popular video where a comedian is talking, but the actual video you see is that of Obama, and the voice, the mannerism is exactly of the president. You can use this for destructive or perpetuate negative outcomes through mass media. So that's a threat that exists today. You can also social engineer. You can things that were common earlier can become more tricky to navigate because of this technology. Things like phishing, spam, malware, anything can be used today to socially engineer, negative situations for communities. Third one is market manipulation. I can use a deep fake of a president promoting a company or negatively speaking about a company, and that can affect stock market prices. So these are some real problems that exist today. In fact, very recently, somewhere in Jan 2023, there is a Pan-Africanist campaign where they're using deep fakes to support the junta in an African country called Burkina Faso. So that's happening today as we speak. So deepfakes, generative AI is becoming smarter. It's becoming more prevalent and can be negatively used. That's another challenge that's happening today in the world. Last one, okay. Actually, this is not the last one. This is one of those very old problems, and this goes back to 2008. There's a very interesting story here. For those who don't know, there's a company called Target. That's the logo on the T-shirt of this lady. Target, for very good reasons, figured a AI algorithm that can predict pregnancy. The intention there was, hey, if I can figure out that a person is pregnant, I can provide offers, promote them, discount, or create a basket of items that I can suggest to them for their upcoming infant, right? That was the intention that Target had. Unfortunately, there was a situation where a teenager walked into a store, made a bunch of purchases, and immediately after the purchases, a bunch of offers congratulating the lady went to the house, but it reached the parent of that teenager, and they were clearly upset. There was a lot of altercation with the parents and the manager of the store of why this was received. It was quite embarrassing for Target at that time. Later on, the parents figured out that the teenager was actually pregnant, and they had to apologize to the store manager for creating ruckus. Since 2008, this is actually a clear violation of privacy. The teenager never really asked for this campaign to be run. So this was known as a clear violation of privacy. And this kind of situation still exists. Today, there are components in your watch that can pretty much predict if you are pregnant or not, based on your on the color of your blood as the laser hits the skin. They can pretty much predict if you're pregnant or not. So these applications and issues still exist today. So how do you create AI that respects your privacy rights? Make sure that you have informed consent. Only when you ask for such solutions should these AI applications serve you. So respecting boundaries, individual boundaries, personal boundaries is something that is still being tested, and AI is again, there are many new use cases that are pushing those privacy boundaries. So this is the fourth study. The fifth one is around bias. And bias is very prevalent almost everywhere. If you understand how AI is created, essentially it's trained on existing data. If your existing data has societal bias, if there are certain communities, certain gender, they're not represented correctly or represented less of, the AI will learn that same patterns and exasperate it. Like it'll basically amplify the same biases in society. This is a real case in the US, which I was in the middle of, where especially in health insurance, certain communities were being neglected because they were priced higher. If you study the data, you would notice that a lot of insurance is being purchased by very specific communities who are more wealthy, more well-to-do, and the AI that got developed in the last 5 to 10 years started to learn that attribute, even when those certain attributes were not part of the data. There's something called as proxy discrimination. Let's say, for example, a data called gender or race is bad, which is the case in healthcare situation. The AI can like detect whether a person is male or whether a person is of a certain race or any other attribute based on some other items in your data set. And it can discriminate you based on that nonlinear combination of variables. So that's the first story, which is around bias. So these are some of those things that are pretty common. And these are challenges that we're trying to solve within the responsible AI realm. Okay. I'll not pause for questions. We'll probably take questions at the end. I'll quickly move on to the next section. Please hold on for me to open up the session for Q&A. Now, as a practitioner, as somebody who builds these applications, how do I look at these problems, right? For that, I need to tell you a little bit about how AI is generated in any organization. This is regardless of the kind of AI you're building. It can be a simple rule-based application to a very complex deep learning or a generative AI application. The elements that you need are pretty much common. The first thing that you would do is understand the business requirement or the requirement of why that AI needs to be created. And then second is figure out what the input data is, gather that, and then you do your EDA. You analyze that data, you build features that are not present in the raw data. You create different hypotheses early on, and based on that hypothesis, you engineer a bunch of new features. And then you do the model development, develop the model, evaluate the model, and then actually deploy it to production, which is this last half of the slide. Everything from prediction, deployment to management and monitoring happens in the end. Now, at each stage, you need to be worried about or concerned about ethical practices. So the yellow boxes that I have here are essentially that. Right at the get-go, you need to figure out what does a responsible AI application look like. I need to be aware of which communities am I underrepresenting. So is that AI relevant to them? What does fairness look like for a company or for your community that you're serving? What does fairness look like? All that needs to be defined right up front when you are actually defining the requirement and testing the hypothesis. Second is when you're collecting the data, you need to take care of elements of privacy. You generally, in most regulated markets, no personally identifiable information can be shared. This is taken care of in most regulated companies. But even if you're not regulated, these things have to be restricted. Otherwise, the AI can learn those very specific individual patterns. So privacy is something that you need to take care of while collecting the data or gathering your data. Second is once you've collected, you also need to study the data for bias. There are various statistical approaches that can help us detect if different sensitive attributes are showing bias. So for example, let's say you have ignored gender as a variable. You can study if gender is being represented through other means just by doing EDA. Okay, so that's the third step, detect for understand bias. And thirdly, you have to develop your model, ensuring that privacy and explainability, XAI is essentially explainable AI, is taken care of. Make sure that your models are transparent and are able to explain to any stakeholders, not just to a data scientist, but also to a business stakeholder, to a project leader, and even to a customer like you and me. They all need to be able to understand why that model made that decision. Roshan, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question or comment?
If anybody has questions, request you to please put it in the Q&A section. Yeah. We'll take it up at the end of the session.
Yeah. See, after model development, once you have established the explainability and the privacy elements, sometimes what can happen is, like I said before, things like proxy discrimination, patterns that are very unique to a specific individual can leak when you're developing the model. So you need to check if the model itself is privacy enabled. Okay. Then you evaluate for biases. So you're not only evaluating during the data assessment phase, you're also evaluating at the model evaluation phase as well. There are again statistical measures. You can use the same statistical measures you used in the EDA to detect bias within your model outputs. Okay. Again, test for privacy, make sure that no personally identifiable information is leaked out. And then you go into the actual production phase, gathering your prediction, making sure your prediction is not biased to a specific sensitive attribute. And then once that is done, you need to secure your systems, especially when it's in the production environment, when it's like live, when it's interacting with real people, either through a mobile application or a web application. You need to make sure that it is protected from things like attacks. Right? There are instances like cybersecurity instances where you can exploit a model to reveal information about a company or about a person, or about the size of an opportunity. And those are some things that you need to take care of while you're deploying these models. And lastly, you need to be monitoring these models. So it is a known fact in the practitioner community that models decay over time. The environment changes, the quality of data changes, the quality of systems changes. Each of these boxes you see may be managed by multiple applications. And these applications evolve, they get upgraded, they get downgraded, they get completely changed over time, right? So you need to be constantly monitoring for these changes and making sure that these changes are not affecting your final outcomes. If they are, then you probably need to reassess if you need to build a new model or check whether that model is still relevant or not. So that's the final leg. And within this monitoring, you also need to incorporate the same bias and explainability components that you've been testing earlier and making sure that you're monitoring in this phase as well. This is how we are tackling it from a practitioner's perspective. Like there are known approaches to making sure some of those challenging problems that we're seeing in the stories that I just revealed are being tackled in a very quantifiable manner within AI development. So this is the practitioner's perspective. I've just touched upon some of this. If you, I think, want to go into details, you probably have to do a little more research. So this is how practitioners are solving this problem. Now let's talk about what's happening in the generative AI and ChatGPT. What are the risks? What are the challenges, right? Some of these might be connected to the stories that I had already shared. So the first one is because these systems are new, there is limited governance. ChatGPT is a highly experimental solution that got released to the public, and people are both amazed and really concerned of how it can be exploited, right? So companies today thinking of applying it are worried about how will this be governed, how will the data be protected. You know, if I ask a very personal question or provide some sensitive information while interacting with this, would that come back and bite me for violating some laws later on? Those are some of the challenges that companies are tackling. So there is limited governance of how these applications can be deployed and used. The second one is around unclear copyright and legal liabilities. So if you look at, if you read enough articles, you will see that a lot of artists, especially digital artists who have been building digital art, and AI is able to disrupt them. And there are some popular artists, especially who create these fantasy art. AI is able to recreate those solutions in the exact manner that these digital artists might recreate, right? So the copyright, like if how do you attribute whether this was generated or inspired by this specific artist, and should the legal entities recognize this art as the original authors is not very clear. So that's the second challenge that we are facing. The third one is on erosion of consumer trust. Most people would still prefer to interact with a real person. And if I tell you that the person you've been talking to is an AI, you may not be happy, right? There are some spaces, especially in customer support, where there is some erosion of trust, where when you really need somebody and when you need somebody to help you on the phone, and actually it turns out that's actually an AI, then most people tend to be very unhappy about it. So there's some level of erosion of trust there. Lastly, there's environmental impact. This needs some explanation. There are a couple of problems here, right? ChatGPT is billions of parameters. And to build that model, it took them about 6 months of training those parameters. And if you look at the carbon impact of training this model, it's equivalent to 5 cars over their lifetime. Right? This is just a single small scale, large scale language model, right? Think about GPT 4, GPT 5, whatever versions we get in the future. These will have more parameters. They will need longer time to train. So the carbon footprint of these models is massive. That's another concern. And this is not just about building AI and how AI is being used, but it's also affecting how the environment is being impacted. So that's that's the last area of concern. There are some ESG aspects where people are very concerned about how AI is being developed today. So those are some of the challenges, and that's why responsible AI is becoming an urgent need for all of us. With that, I'll step into how are we tackling these challenges, especially as a community. There are many ways. I think I'll showcase some of those here. The first one is around governance and regulations. There are AI bills being put in place. US has a AI Bill of Rights. It is drafted and proposed, but not yet fully public. California has already published a AI bill, which kind of restricts users primarily in the privacy area. You cannot share a lot of personally identifiable information very easily, specifically in California. It's actually targeting a lot of these large tech organizations. India too is coming up with a similar AI bill. We have a data governance bill already in place. So most governments are quickly responding to this. Thirdly, there are institutes, very specific institutes, like, for example, very recently, French universities banned the use of ChatGPT because students there are using it to plagiarize. They can simply ask the question that they got in their homework and get the responses from ChatGPT. Okay, so there are universities that are directly banning the use of some of these generative AI solutions. So this is from a restriction perspective. Now, with restrictions and newer disruptions, there are also new businesses that get formed. There is an increasing case for insurance in AI. There are large companies that are being affected, and to protect themselves from harm because of AI, they are buying insurance. So let's say if my AI tomorrow becomes rogue, I no longer have control of the AI. I don't mean that it becomes sentient and is able to have conversations. I mean, if a hacker or a cybersecurity criminal takes control of the AI, they can gain a lot of information or even sell it back. So there are a lot of these cybersecurity threats. To protect themselves from these threats, companies are buying insurance. Okay. And then separately on cybersecurity itself, there are solutions now that can detect if there is an AI that is interacting or a non-AI that is being interacting. So that's a bunch of new business models that are being tested and being developed. So that's how the world is responding to these generative AI. Thirdly, the creators of these generative AI are also creating solutions to counteract them. So OpenAI that developed the ChatGPT also has a classifier that can detect whether it's generated by ChatGPT or not. If you've studied this, it's not very good. There are alternate solutions that others have developed, which are far more better at detecting if the text that you generated is AI generated or not. Same thing with images, with sound, with video. There are solutions today where you can detect an AI through AI. So that's another way the world is responding. The third is at an organizational level. I, for example, am developing the ethics and policy for my current organization, Fractal. Similarly, DeepMind, Google, all the large tech organizations have their own ethics and responsible AI practices in place. So that's broadly how the world is responding to these challenges. So this is broadly what I wanted to talk to you folks about. Just open your eyes into how AI is being used and how AI is almost disrupting all of our lives. And it is going to disrupt a lot more. It's quite a exciting time and a dangerous time to live in. I'm just living in this time where I can tackle some of these challenges. I quickly wanted to share these with you. Hopefully this made sense. With this, I'll pause here and take any questions. I'm going to stop sharing screen.
We have a question from Darshana Khandalwal. Will AI ChatGPT replace the jobs of academic content writers?
Academic, it depends on what kind of academic content you're writing. Likely it will make you more productive than actually replacing your job. Earlier, you would have to sift through lots of articles to find maybe one or two insights and then attribute it, right? ChatGPT will only support that exercise. You will probably become more faster at collecting the right insight, framing that insight, and presenting it. The challenge today is most of these solutions don't attribute where this insight is coming from. But there are other, if you look at non-ChatGPT solutions, there are ways you can collect that. So I don't think they'll completely get disrupted. If you're an academic, your job as a content writer might become more faster rather than get completely eliminated, because you still need your creative brain to create more AI solutions, right? Or any other challenging human solutions. I don't see it disrupting yet.
Another question from Darshana was, which sectors would be having job opportunities after the implementation of AI ChatGPT, and courses beneficial with respect to this in near future?
There are two questions, right? Which sectors will have jobs from?
Which sectors would be having job opportunities after the implementations of ChatGPT?
There are many. It's not clear yet. It's going to shake the industry. Definitely, people who are developing AI solutions, they will definitely be needed. Software developers, computer scientists, security experts, infrastructure experts, even to some extent managing environmental, social, even governance. These are some of those immediate spaces where people will need help with, especially big companies. So those industries will definitely grow. So anybody who has expert knowledge on AI will definitely be required in the near to midterm, like 5-10 years. Easily, people will need more of these to develop newer business models, newer business use cases, solve these privacy challenges, responsible AI challenges. We definitely need more AI experts. What's the second part?
Second question, is regarding the cost, which we'll park it for later.
Okay, sure.
Another question is by Bandal Mundi Shrikant, asking how to escape this trap. I'm not sure what he's meaning, but maybe how to escape this ChatGPT wave is what is.
You can't. It's out there. By the way, this technology is not new. It's been there for the past 2 years. The good thing is that OpenAI released it to the public, and they have created something that's very close to what humans would have conversations with, right? So that's the disruption. I don't think you can escape it. It's going to become more prominent.
Manoj asks, sorry, are you finished?
No, I'm done. Let's go to the next question.
So Manoj Kumar is asking, how is AI and like of ChatGPT going to impact education sector? Will it be more beneficial and augmentative to the existing setup, or detrimental and disruptive?
It's yet to be seen, because education sector itself is evolving even before ChatGPT, right? The older models of course-based, or like classroom-based training and curriculum-based training that we used to have earlier, that itself is changing. But with ChatGPT, you have a new tool, you have a new application. The institutes, the traditional institutes will definitely be challenged. Like there's a French university that's already banning ChatGPT, right? So how do you work alongside ChatGPT? Something that you'll have to figure out. How do you measure a person's true ability, true creative, true problem-solving abilities will be challenged. I don't see education as a sector reducing its role, but it has to navigate the new world, right? How this technology is going to disrupt is yet to be known.
Yeah, Bandla Mudi Shrikant also asks, can a non-technical pursue AI?
Depends on what is your area of focus. If you are thinking of applying AI within industries, then definitely you can pursue an AI curriculum. But if you're exploring deeper problems within the AI space, especially in the research space, which folks like in OpenAI are doing, then it might be a longer path where you have to learn the fundamentals of how AI is created, the math, the stats, the computer science, the application, and the ethical and moral challenges as well, because OpenAI has solved that to some extent. So that'll be my response. Any more questions?
No, nothing for now.
Right, I can pause if there are any further questions.
Yes, all the attendees, please, whatever questions that you might have, please post it. Whatever questions are coming regarding our course in AI and management, we will park it and we will get the relevant person to connect with you tomorrow. Shivangi has a thought, and it is, I guess it is humans' moral responsibility to introduce ethics code into AI. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, see, morality and ethics are very tricky subject. It also is dependent on what moment in history you are part of, what culture you're part of, what age you belong to, and there are also some religious aspects to this. And this is something that we have studied very closely, and including philosophy, of course. So it's not an easy problem. And depending on which country and what leadership you have, what community you belong to, these things define the moral aspect of it. The legality is predefined. Whether it needs to change or not is what the world is trying to figure out today. Thirdly, is how you personally take it is something that we have to solve as a community. Right? Some people will like to share data. Some people will not like to share data. Right? How do we as a community feel about it, and what is right, what is wrong, is something that has to be thought of by each country. And I am supporting that, right? Like I am helping the government define those policies. If folks have ideas or things that we need to inform the government or the policymakers on, feel free to reach out. I can be your voice out.
Thank you for that answer, Akbar. Pankaj Soni asks how the AI will help in infrastructure sector.
Infrastructure. I'm not very familiar with the infrastructure sector, but I'm definitely sure that I can think of a lot of automation becoming quicker and faster. So if there are any areas where you needed content, or let's say let's take civil engineering, right? Like if you wanted some hey, generate a plan for the city with these resources and constraint, the AI, we can train AI to develop those. So your productivity will definitely increase. And then you just, as a human, have to validate it, pick the ones that you like, and then iterate. So more productivity, more automation, faster turnaround of existing solutions.
Thank you, Akbar. Sumit Tak asks, which branch of engineering is going to get affected most by AI ChatGPT?
Positively or negatively? I think positively, I would say computer science will still be relevant. We will still need more engineers. We'll definitely need a lot more folks who can scale these applications. If you understand the guts of these solutions, they're called large language models. They are not easy to host like any generic web application. It takes ChatGPT about $250,000 a day to just be running in the beta phase. So think about very specific applications, right? So engineering will remain relevant, especially in the IT computer science world. Secondly is around managing these infrastructures, these technical infrastructures. So warehousing, platform as a service, these things will become more prominent in the future. So computer science, those spaces will continue to be like positively be affected. The ones that are in the long run they'll get negatively affected is a lot of content writing, right? Copywriting is going to get disrupted. You already have a lot of AI today that can generate this content very quickly. How do you creatively solve these problems as a copywriter is going to be challenged. That's one area that's another I don't think. will survive long.
Any more questions from the audience? If not, then we'll wrap the session. I think that's about it. Thank you a lot for this wonderful session, Akbar. It was extremely insightful. I'm sure everyone here has a lot to take away from this session. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.